California program at the New America Foundation, a public policy think tank based in Washington, D.C. and in Sacramento. New America seeks solutions to many of the urgent policy problems facing both California and the United States, and has been especially active in recent days in questions related to the California budget and political reform. And whether Tuesday's voter rejection of 5 of 6 budget-related ballot proposals really represents a turning point in California politics, it surely shines a spotlight on the state's chronic fiscal problems. These stem from a broken system of governance and an outdated constitution that virtually guarantees, especially in hard times, that lawmakers are unable to balance the California budget from year to year. In turn, as budget politics dominate, progress on the truly urgent issues that confront the state is paralyzed. And as the results of Tuesday's special election sink in, I'm reminded a bit of Walt Kelly's famous comment in his classic comic strip, Pogo. We have met the enemy, and he is us. The interlocking and inflexible propositions that the public had previously voted for have created a budget maze that even the most capable and dedicated legislators might find impossible to untangle. New America is delighted this morning to partner with Noel Perry and his staff at Next 10, an independent, nonpartisan policy institute that explores how critical trends in the state, in particular the growing green economy, education, and tax and budget issues, will affect the future livability of California. Next 10 is especially focused on how citizen involvement can affect these critical issues. And beginning in 2005, Noel and his team created the California Budget Challenge, an interactive game that allows you to try to balance the state budget and to experience the difficulties of doing so. I'm delighted that you joined us today to try out an updated, new and improved, or perhaps new and more sobering version of this game. And I'd like to call on Noel Perry to introduce the rest of the day.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Lisa. It's a real pleasure for Next 10 to team up with the New American Foundation, and this is our first event together, and hopefully it's the first of many because we share many characteristics. Probably the first and foremost is our nonpartisanship and our approach to trying to solve problems in California. And I'm honored to have been asked to lead the California leadership group for New America Foundation, and it's a pleasure to work closely with you. And I'm very, very impressed with all the work that you've been doing, both here in California and in Washington. And I'd also like to highlight Lenny Nandaka here, who is also on the board of the New American Foundation. And Lenny, I'm honored that you've come today to join us. As we've said, we are a nonpartisan organization working to educate and engage Californians on many critical issues, working at the intersection of the environment and the economy. And we recently came out with our second edition of the California Green Innovation Index, looking at AB 32, which is the California Global Solutions Act, looking at the economy and looking at how we reduce emissions. And as many of you may have seen, Fran Pavli's law that came in 2002 was just joined with the feds, Barack Obama and Governor Schwarzenegger, and others were in Washington to increase our miles per gallon, 35 miles per gallon. We had done that, but it wasn't going to be until later on. Now it's going to be in 2016. That was the model of the legislation that California created. So it's not all doom and gloom. California has been a leader on so many issues, particularly in the environment, and we just saw it the other day in Washington, D.C. I had a few comments that I was going to make. Maybe you're all lucky because I left them over there about the budget. So I'm going to leave most of it for Mr. Paul. But I'd just like to say a few things. The media today was great. Jim Wonderman, our own Jim Wonderman, the head of Bay Area Council, that Lenny is the chair of, was on the cover of the New York Times talking about a constitutional convention that many across the state believe we need to do. And then Senator Steinberg was in the Wall Street Journal talking about the fact that he's going to be around after Governor Schwarzenegger goes, and a lot of it is going to be his problem in terms of balancing the budget here in California. And you read the different pundits of the LA Times and the Chronicle, and yes, Tuesday was a watershed event here in California, and And even though Proposition 1A didn't pass, in a way, it didn't really make any difference because the budget challenge at $21 billion is so severe. I think everybody is talking about very significant cuts, and it looks like that's what's going to be happening. I think that the legislature is not going to be making many bills this session that involve any kind of significant money. I think the initiative process is going to be slowed down significantly in terms of creating money that has to make money to do something in California. So in a way, maybe we've kind of hit the wall, but maybe not. So at this point, I'd like to introduce Mark Paul, the Deputy Director of New America Foundation here in California. And he has a very, very storied career, both in newspapers and otherwise. He has tremendous ideas and is a tremendous visionary for the state of California. So without me talking any further, Mark, I'd like to introduce you. It's an honor to be with you today.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks, Noel, and welcome to all of you. If there's one indisputable message from Tuesday's election, it's that voters were not happy to have the budget hot potato dropped into their lap. Their message back to the legislature and governor was, do your job. And that sentiment is understandable. We're all weary after years of we're all weary after years of budget deficits and budget wrangling. But voters can't get off the hook that easily. Californians can throw a tantrum. They can stamp their 76 million little feet and thrash around on the ground. But there's no getting around the fact that this crisis is their crisis, it's our crisis. Our direction as a society, our success as an economy are at stake. We have big choices to make, and it's our duty as citizens to help make them. So I commend you for being here today, and hope when we get to the round to making the choices that your first response isn't to hold your breath and threaten to pass out. So before we get to the budget challenge, I want to take a few minutes to review where we are in the wake of the special election and how we got here over the last 3 decades since Proposition 13 transformed our state. Let's start with spending, a word often pronounced with a capital S and delivered with a sneer. As you can see here in the green line, California's general fund spending, measured as a share of the state's personal income, is lower today than it was 30 years ago. It has moved in a narrow range over the last 3 decades, swinging far less than the size of the federal budget, which is the blue line at the top of the chart. So as fierce as our debates have been, there have been quarrels over roughly 1 penny of every dollar of state output. The biggest spending change over the last 3 decades has been in California's priorities. In 1985, schools were the largest spending item. They were followed by higher education and health care. And these are the other components of state spending in 1985. Here's the same chart for 2008, California's last full fiscal year. Schools remain the top priority with about the same share of the budget as in 1985. And health care remains the second priority, its share of the budget having risen, a product of the inexorable increase in health care costs that are afflicting all of us, both in the public sector and the private sector. But the biggest growth item has been criminal justice, a reflection of the huge increase in the state's prison population. Prisons have gobbled up big shares of the budget that used to go to higher education, social services, and general government. So if you want to summarize California government, state government in a phrase, you'd say that California educates, medicates, and incarcerates. The tax story is similar to the spending story. The state tax burden, the share of income that we Californians pay to the state, has moved in a narrow range of about 1 penny. Again, you'll see much bigger swings in the federal tax burden, the blue line. And you also see that the places where the tax burden, the tax collections go up highest in California correspond to the two great asset bubbles we've had in the last decade. The internet stock bubble of the 1990s and then the housing bubble earlier this decade. Just as the composition of state spending has changed, so has the composition of state revenues. Most of California's taxes today claim a smaller share of the state's income than they did 30 years ago. Some, like the estate tax, the corporation tax, and the vehicle license fee, the so-called car tax, have been cut. Other of our taxes yield less because of changes in the economy. Our cars get better mileage, so we pay less in fuel tax as a percentage of our income. We drink and smoke less, paying less in sin taxes. And we have shifted our consumption away from tangible goods that are subject to the sales tax and more towards services, which in California are not subject to the sales tax. Under normal circumstances, this erosion in a lot of our tax base would have started causing big budget problems a decade ago. But as you can see, that they were masked largely by the huge surge in personal income tax collections in the 1990s, and again, another surge in the middle of this decade, both a consequence of the bubbles. This surge was driven entirely by economic factors. In fact, the income tax rate is actually lower today than it was in 1979, at the beginning of this period. And of course, the biggest factor driving the surge is the big shift in income we've seen over the last 30 years, with almost all of the income growth in California and the nation going to the top 10% of households, which pay income taxes at the highest rate. So when that internet stock bubble burst in 2001, California's structural deficit was exposed. This chart shows the state's annual operating balance for the last decade. In all, California in the last 10 years spent $26 billion more than it took in taxes on an operating basis, which we largely had covered over with borrowing. As a result, California now faces a double budget whammy. That long existing structural deficit now combined with the effects of the recession, which has clobbered revenue in the state, driving it down by more than 10%. The alignment of these two deficits, one piled on top of the other, is the crisis we have been struggling with. So what comes next? By the governor's estimate, California, after Tuesday's election, now faces a $21.3 billion deficit over the next 13 months. This is in addition to the $36 billion in solutions the legislature enacted in February. This chart shows the mix of actions that lawmakers took then, minus the ones that the voters rejected on Tuesday. As you can see, we've had a combination of spending cuts, tax increases, and federal stimulus. And this chart shows the solutions that we've already enacted, plus the ones the governor proposed last week in his May revision. This is what, in total, how if the governor's plan were adopted in full, we would solve the budget crisis. In addition to the budget crisis, we in California face a cash crisis. Even in normal years, the state's cash flow is highly variable. The state government operates a lot, has a similar economic model to if you're a grower of cut flowers. All of your expenses come in the beginning of the year, and all of your revenues come at the holidays, and at Easter, Mother's Day, and graduation and June weddings. In normal times, the state manages its cash flow with internal borrowing from balances in special fund accounts and by short-term borrowing in the financial markets. But in this crisis, all of the internal sources have already been tapped. And as you can see here, the fall-off in revenue is creating enormous cash gaps. The legislative analyst estimates that California will need to borrow more than $23 billion in short-term money to get through the next fiscal year. In other words, just to be able to pay the bills to the vendors, to state employees, to school districts, and all the people who get money out of the state government. And with the financial markets in turmoil and California's fiscal situation so troubled, it is unlikely that the state can sell so many short-term notes or pay the interest rates that the market may demand, even if it could fully tap those markets. So that really is going to make it essential for the federal government to step in some way to help California cope, with a guarantee perhaps of our short-term borrowing, with the kind of loans being given through the TARP program to big banks and insurance companies, or perhaps with an expanded stimulus package. If California starts sending $1 billion of IOUs in payment of its bills, its contagion could well spread to municipal bond markets and infect the entire country and the ability of states and local governments to borrow for their needs. Finally, as we cope with the deficit and the cash crisis, we need to be thinking about fundamental reform of how we govern ourselves, as we've said. Our current system defeats accountability and prevents California from being nimble and flexible enough to meet crises like this one. Voters this week hated being asked to tackle the budget crisis, but there are many things that make sense to do that simply cannot be done without voter assent, because so much of what we do is already built into law, either by initiatives or by the constitutional tangles we have created for ourselves. As an example, I'll leave you with this final chart, which reminds us that in the complex hydraulic financial system that is California government, the state general fund, which is the blue slice here, which is at the heart of our discussion today, is only a fraction of the money we spend as Californians for government. I would argue that much of the lowest priority public spending and the least defensible claims on taxpayers' dollars come not at the state level, but at the local level. The outsized wages and pensions of police and firefighters, or the cozy redevelopment deals with developers come immediately to mind. Because so many of the flows of money to local government have some kind of constitutional protection, it is hard to cut back where the cutting is best on these low priorities in moments of crisis like this. For example, there's a technical term to describe the situation where we are now contemplating closing off college to our children and taking health insurance away from kids, while the city of Santa Clara is about to give millions of dollars in public redevelopment subsidies to lure the San Francisco 49ers 40 miles south down the peninsula. It is, I think the term is an obscenity. It is truly, in a truly just society, the city fathers and mothers of Santa Clara would be set adrift in a boat in the Pacific with the DVDs of the last 5 San Francisco seasons, but 49er seasons, but no oar or rudder. But I think all of us would settle for a less drastic solution, the kind of fundamental reform in our governing processes that would let us again put first things first. That's for the future, I hope. But today, you have choices to make, and I will turn it over to Noel to be your guide. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. My favorite graph was the one of where we get our revenue from. That's a fabulous graph. It really shows the changes. So we're going to do the California Budget Challenge. We're going to get going. The idea of the Budget Challenge is not simply to close the current budget gap, but to understand the ongoing effects of decisions we make. You all have instant response clickers, right? Okay, so after I read the choices, we will put up a 5-second clock, and you will need to lock in your vote. But you can change your vote all the way up until the end. And if you vote 3 times on 3 different things, it's only going to be the last one that you voted for. In addition to taking the challenge, we want to hear what your ideas are about the budget. And one thing we're doing right now, after today, we're going to be changing this, you know, it's a very dynamic process, this budget process, and, you know, you get the May revise, and then we didn't raise enough money, which is part of the problem that Mark pointed out. The revenues weren't as great because the economy's falling off. So we're going to be making some changes in some of these policy questions. So if you have suggestions, we want to know. And we're not going to get through all of these. It's like 7 or 8 on the spending side, 7 or 8 on the taxing side. We tried to decide which ones to do because we're not going to get through all of them. I think there seems to be such a focus on spending now. We're going to go through all the spending ones, and then we'll get to the tax ones. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of focus on taxes right now. Speaker Bass said a couple weeks ago that she didn't see legislature doing much with taxes. So we're going to focus on the spending side. And in these questions, if you think that we should create other questions, such as, you know, cut schools by $5 billion instead of $1 billion, or whatever, we want to hear that too, because we're going to take what you have to say and consider it. Also, the bathrooms go out here, and then go to the right, and then go all the way down to your left. Okay, so we're going to talk about K-12 education. In California, for pupil spending has been below the national average for over 25 years. For the last 10 years, the amount we spend per student has remained flat when adjusted for inflation.
We just need 1 minute, but keep going and then we can get to it at the end.
Okay, so how much should California spend per pupil? The first choice in every policy option is to leave things the same way they are now. So in choice 1, when we get to it, per pupil spending will be about $2,300 or 17% below the projected national average in 5 years. Choice 2 cuts per pupil spending by 10%, saving $6.8 billion and placing us 25% below the projected national average. Choice 3 spends $7 billion to increase per pupil spending, leaving the state 8.5% below the projected national average. And number 4, choice 4 spends $14.1 billion to increase per pupil spending to equal the projected national average. So, do we have any questions? Well, go ahead.
Over what time frame?
Oh, the budget challenge works over 5 years.
Okay.
Okay. It used to be 10 years, the next 10 years, but we decided that was too long and changed it to 5 years. Okay, so are you ready to vote? Go ahead and vote. Where's that clicker? 5, 4. Okay, we're going to be comparing these answers with some of the other answers we've had over the last couple of months. Okay. All right, so I think what immediately, I've noticed right away that 38% of us, you want to spend $14.1 billion. Because you're committed to what? Putting us at the national average? Okay, and then 25%, a very interesting breakup, $7 billion to the deficit. And then 13% of you, we don't have a lot of cutters here. I don't think you're going to, it's probably good that you're not up in Sacramento right now. Okay, so we're going to do it again. Okay, so one of the things we do sometimes is we try to get a 2/3 consensus. So now, why don't we do that on this one? Okay, you all have to vote again, okay? And so I think you have to, I think you want to, let's vote again and vote for a 1, 3, or 5. Or 4, sorry. 1, 3, or 4. Okay, vote, please. So it would be 66 points, whatever. Okay, let me see. All right.
Let's call it 10.
All right, so let me see. Maybe we should just leave it here.
Right.
Yeah. You guys want to just leave it here and go on to the next one? Okay, so the deficit, oh, we started at 22 billion? Okay, so are you changing this?
Well, no, because there's no change, so.
So we're going with no change on that? Yeah. That wasn't really what this group thought, though. I think we should, because most, wasn't, what percent? What percent was for at least 7 billion? So,
60.
okay, so why don't, 60, okay,
So you want to add 7 million?
At 7 billion. The 60 said 66% were at least for 7 billion.
But the majority vote was to add 14.1 million. That was the majority vote.
Plurality.
Two-thirds vote between 7 and 14.
All right.
Now, I'll make it 7.
7.
Now, Mark, what do you say? What should we do?
I think
it's
7
14.
billion makes a lot.
Okay, this is Mark DiCamillo from Field Research. You read about him all the time. He totally nailed how much what the votes were going to be. Congratulations. What they predicted is what it was. How people voted. Thank you, Mark. Okay, so now this is something that they're talking about. Really, this makes me sad. You know, to take a cleaver to the UC system. But anyway, that's what they're talking about. What should California college tuition policy be? No change, increased tuition by about 9% per year for UC, and so that's what's going to be happening, right? Okay. 2, keep fees flat for the next 5 years and increase budget spending on higher education by $1 billion to make up for these lost revenues. 3, slow increase in fees down to 4% per year, costing $500 million. 4, spend $900 million and slow the fee increase to 4% per year, costing $500 million, and also provide UC and CSU an extra $400 million to increase access to higher education and scholarships. 5, increase fees by 9% for UC and 10% for CSU, and reduce costs by capping enrollment growth at 0, saving $400 million. I think you all saw Michelle Obama was at the Monterey. You had a question, Diane?
Yeah, how does the tuition level compare nationally?
Okay.
Low.
What I think I know, and maybe I don't know, but I think compared to other states with high-level educational universities, we are cheaper than them. For example, Michigan. I think we're cheaper than Michigan. Michigan is at the same level. That's what I think I know. So I think some people argue this stuff should go up. Tuition should go up because it's too cheap. Go ahead.
Once again, the community colleges have been left out of the reckoning. One of the reasons that California comes in so cheap is because the community college fees are the lowest in the nation by half, or more. So we have to include community colleges because 80% of our college-going students are community college students.
So have we ever had community colleges?
Try to think about that.
Oh, I guess Sarah's saying that in the K-12 numbers.
They're the K through
14.
Okay.
Although you wouldn't have seen them, but. Okay, so let's vote on this. You ready? Okay, 24% no change. 2, $1 billion to the deficit, that's only 8%. $500 million to the deficit, 24%. $900 million from deficit, 14%. $400 million from the deficit, 30%. So, let me see here. Why don't we try this again? Why don't we'll do 1, 3, or 5. So, can you please vote again for 1, 3, or 5? 1, 3, or 5? Okay. So this is a group that doesn't want to get to 66%. So I think we'll just take number 5. $400 million from the deficit. Okay, that's good. Next one. You already did it?
Yeah.
So what's our deficit now? Wow, 28.6. We're making progress. Okay, now healthcare. Should California scale back or expand healthcare coverage provided through the Medi-Cal program? Number 1, no change. Number 2, eliminate certain Medi-Cal services such as dental care for adults. Reduce eligibility for families and limit services for undocumented and newly arrived immigrants, saving $800 million. 3, spend $500 million to expand Medi-Cal eligibility for working families with 2 children from the current level of about $22,000 to $44,000, as well as expand eligibility for the Healthy Families Program. Any questions on this one? Okay,
How
let's
does
vote.
SHIP fit
Okay.
into this?
Say that
How does
again.
the state children's health insurance program fit into this?
That is healthy families.
So does no change mean that we are basically confirming the expansion of the state health insurance program that was made a couple years ago?
No change is the status quo, so yes.
So we don't really have anything that rolls back the recent expansion of SHIP, which would seem to me a reasonable option. If we've recently expanded the program, why not roll that back on the grounds we can't afford the expansion?
Well, so the difficulty of cutting any of this healthcare spending is that the federal government pays about 60 cents on the dollar for all of our health programs, whether they're the Medi-Cal for needy families or the healthy families for the children. And so an exercise like this needs to be not quite that complicated, but it isn't, you know, we would have to get a federal waiver to do number 2, and that has not yet been negotiated with the Obama administration. I can talk about it more after this.
Lee, do you have any comment on this one?
No, Micah, I think, said the important thing.
Okay, so let's vote. And we're not going to do the 2/3 because of time. So, but that would be fun.
Although we challenge everybody to achieve it.
Yeah. Okay, this one's pretty clear. No change. Although this is certainly going to be looked at up in Sacramento. And okay, next, human services. Should spending for human services programs be reduced? Number 1, no change. Number 2, save $1.8 billion and reduce the state SSP grant and suspend the June 2010 cost of living adjustments for aged and disabled SSI SSP recipients. 3, reduce state participation in IHSS provider wages from $11.50 to $9.50 per hour, saving $100 million. Is that what the is that for the in-home?
Yeah.
So that's what this big thing was with the SEIU, the big matter. Okay. Save $900 million and eliminate cash assistance for children if their parents fail to meet work participation requirements. Suspend the 2009 COLA and reduce grants by 10%. And number 5, finally, save $2.8 billion and make all 3 reductions. What? Okay. Any?
Could you please read the bottom 2? They're very hard to see.
Okay. Number 4, save $900 million and eliminate cash assistance for children if their parents fail to meet work participation requirements. Suspend the 2009 COLA, that's the inflation increase, and reduce grants by 10%. The last one is save $2.8 billion by doing all 3 of these. Okay, we're going to vote. Okay, no change. Let's go on to the next one. Okay, the environment. What steps should California take to reduce greenhouse gases that cause global warming? Number 1, no change. Number 2, spend $200 million and provide grants to California universities to accelerate the commercialization of renewable energy technologies. Number 3, spend $500 million to add to the $1 billion that California utilities are now investing in cost-effective energy efficiency improvements. Number 4, impose a surcharge or rebate of up to $2,500 on new cars based on their greenhouse gas emissions. And number 5, finally, spend $700 million and take all 3 actions.
What's the net on number 4?
Yeah. There's no
change. There's no change? It's just a policy with no budget?
There's no
I think the assumption is that ends up breaking even.
right. So the surcharge charged to one person is paying for the rebate and got received by the other.
Okay, let's vote. I guess we're not going to reduce the deficit on this one.
Pretty good.
No change?
Yeah.
All right, well, this is interesting responses, but no change is the answer, and let's go on to the next one. Criminal justice, as you know, if you've been reading, the governor's talking a lot about this area. Should corrections costs be reduced by eliminating parole for certain nonviolent offenders? Number one, no change. Number two, save $700 million and eliminate parole supervision for parolees with no current or prior nonviolent, non-serious, and non-sex convictions. And number three, which is save $1.4 billion and shift the responsibility for both juvenile and adult drug and alcohol offenders to counties. And then, so you say, okay, you're going to shift it, how are you going to fund that? To fund the transferred responsibilities and ensure costs would not increase at the county level, this assumes that the car tax would increase from 0.65% to 1%. So we realize that this last one is not so great because it's kind of conditional upon something else happening. And I was just reading today in one of the columns, when Governor Schwarzenegger came in, everybody was upset with the car tax. And so he got rid of it. That was one of the first acts. That was approximately $4 billion. Okay, that was like 6 years ago. Well, what did I say, 5 or 6? It was about $5 billion. Multiply that times 5, 5 years, So in other words, if we hadn't gotten rid of the car tax, I don't think we'd be where we are today, I think. So, anyway, we're going to vote on this. Are you guys ready?
Didn't we increase, wasn't part of the budget deal that was in place?
Yeah, they increased that by a little bit.
Over 1%.
It's 1.15, and so it would be the percentage difference on top of the 1.15 to accommodate that. This was the legislative analyst proposal before that happened.
I see. So,
Right.
but in essence, we've already
Yes.
increased the.
Yes.
So, all right, so we're going to vote on this. Are you all ready? Please vote. Okay, $700 million from the deficit, $1.4 billion from the deficit. I think we should vote again on this one. Yeah, let's vote again on 2 and 3, please. Number 2 is save $700 million. Number 3, $1.4 billion. It's a tough crowd. All right, so we're gonna. Well, we did get up to the 1.4 trillion.
Yeah.
We saved some. We reduced the deficit. We're down to 27.2 billion. Okay, this is one that I was reading the other day. I don't know, maybe somebody here knows. What are the unfunded future obligations for health and pension costs in California? Does anybody know the answer to that question? Sarah's saying that the health is 40. It's a lot of money, and we haven't really dealt with it. So we're beginning to deal with it here. So, should money be set aside for future health care benefits for retired state employees and/or cut benefits? No change. Number 2, spend $1 billion per year as recommended by the LAO to move toward full pre-funding of future health benefits for retired state workers. Number 3, the state should reduce health benefits for current and/or future state workers and increase employee and/or retiree contributions. These changes lower future costs, but no changes in 2013-14. And number 4, spend $1 billion per year to move toward full pre-funding of future health benefits for retired state workers and reduce health benefit coverage for current and/or future state workers. This one may be a little bit confusing, although maybe you all understand Does everybody understand it? You want me to read anything again, or? Okay, let's vote. Okay, 49% of you believe we should change the policy, number 3. Can we go back to number 3, because I want to see what we did. The state should reduce health benefits for current and or future state workers and increase employee and or retiree contributions. These changes lower future costs with no changes in 2013-2014. Okay, so we have no effect here on the deficit. So let's go to the next one. Okay, John, should the state expand eligibility for unemployment insurance benefits and or provide additional training services to displaced workers? Number 1, no change. Number 2, expand unemployment benefits by using workers' most recent earnings. This would not affect the general fund, but would worsen the condition of the state's unemployment fund. 3, spend $500 million to increase life skills, reentry training, and job placement services. And number 4, spend $500 million and increase both unemployment and training benefits. So this one's pretty straightforward. So why don't we go? Okay. This one's very clear. Okay. What? No. All right, let's go on to the next one. 50, that's one of the highest votes we've got on the first shot, 57%. Okay, so we're into taxes now. So we've gone through all the spending options. So I guess this is not a group that's going to cut the deficit and bring it to balance on that side, it seems. So now we're going to run through revenue. So this is all your opportunity to increase taxes in California and move towards reducing the deficit. Okay, the income tax, no change. 2, raise income taxes on upper income taxpayers by reinstating the 10 to 11% brackets, which will increase revenues by $4.5 billion. Increase revenues by $4.5 billion by imposing an income tax surtax of 8% on all taxpayers. So we know Californians, they all like this one, but that one doesn't work. Number 4, cut income taxes for all taxpayers by 8%, reducing revenues by $4.5 billion. So you can increase the deficit by choosing this one. And you can get $4.5 billion by doing this one or that one. All right, so why don't we vote? Or you can do nothing. Here's a chance to bring that down by $4.5 billion, or increase it by $4.5 billion. Tax the rich, all right! 73%. This is what, I like this one because we were at a meeting once, and we got 100% of that. So we're making progress here. Okay, next. Okay, sales tax. Would you like to extend the sales tax? Oh, just so you know, check out the Wall Street Journal today. The editorial, they were ranting exactly the opposite there, saying that they suggested that California should reduce the income tax, a flat income tax to 5 or 6%, and sales tax down to 5 to 6%. They said people will not leave the state and will make more money. This is the Wall Street Journal. I'm not editorializing here, I'm just saying what I read. Okay, a sales tax, would you like to extend the sales tax to a selected set of services? Legal accounting, consulting, auto repair, personal care, amusement, or raise or lower the sales tax rate. So this is an interesting one because there's a lot of moving parts on this one. The newness of it being services, we don't tax services in California. We only tax products that are sold. So no change. Number 2, expand the sales tax base. And so that means to the services, right, Sarah? Yeah. Increasing state revenue by $3.2 billion. 3, extend sales tax to a selected set of services. but offset most of the revenue gain by cutting the sales tax rate by 0.5%. So that says do this new thing for services, but then cut the other part of the sales tax. 4, increase sales tax rate by 1%, increasing revenues by $6.4 billion. Now, what does that mean in terms of what we just did?
We already
This is changing
Okay,
to
so
accept
just so you know, so this is outdated in a way, this one little question, because we did that
temporarily.
temporarily, right? And that's what the voters said no to extend it for 2 more years. Okay, and then number 5, cut the sales tax rate by 0.5%, reducing revenues by $3.2 billion. So there's something for everyone here.
So 4 makes it permanent for 5 years.
Okay, yeah, so R4, which is different, you can do it for 5 years with the California Budget Challenge, if you want. So why don't we vote on this? Wow. Okay, we're going to reduce the deficit by 3.2 billion. Because let's go back to 2, because we're going to tax services.
Some services.
Select services. That was this one, right? Phrase? Sorry. Okay. Right. Okay. All right. So where are we at now? We've cracked 20 billion. We're at 19.5 billion, and we still. Where are we at? Okay, we're coming up on the car tax. Would you like to reinstate the 2% vehicle license fee to help balance the budget? So what did you say, Sarah? We've done 3. We've done 3. Save 1.3 billion and increase the car tax. So is it at 1.15 now?
It's not permanent.
No, 2 years.
So this makes it permanent for the 5 years.
Right. But the rate is 1.15. Okay. All right. Number 1 is no change. Number 2, reinstate the higher 1997 fee level, 2%, increasing revenues by 4.9 billion. Then 3, save 1.3 billion and increase the car tax from the current rate. So that's what it's at. They've already done that. But we would do it for 5 years if you voted for this, as opposed to 2 years, which is what the legislature did. Okay, why don't we vote? Well, this is very impressive. Okay. Okay, so let's go back to 2. Let's go back to 2. That's $5 billion. Show us what that one was. Okay. That's interesting. Great. I won't comment. Great. All right. So what are we down to? 14.6 billion. All right. Car tax. Now we're going to the corporation tax. Should the corporate tax be raised or lowered? No change. And it says right now the current tax in California for corporations is 8.84%. Should we increase the corporate tax rate to its prior peak of 9.6%, increasing revenues by almost $1 billion or 900 million? Or cut the corporate tax rate to 8.1%, which would reduce revenues by 900 million. So you can leave it the same. You can get 900 million to continue to reduce the deficit, or you could make the deficit bigger by 900 million. 2 questions here.
How does the corporate tax rate in either of these scenarios compare to other states? Any information on that?
Our corporate tax rate is relatively high, but there are a lot of exemptions, Swiss cheese. The effective rate is much lower than the actual nominal rate. And of course, the legislature just enacted as part of the budget deal in February a change creating an option to use a single sales factor for multi-state corporations, which will result in about a $2 billion annual loss of cutting taxes to corporations.
But just looking at the revenues, we rank 6th when you don't look at everything else, but just look at the dollars. We rank 6th compared to the 6th highest.
6th highest, even though we're the largest state.
No, per capita.
Oh, per capita.
I wanted to just put it in context. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and also like the split roll, there's been talk for years in California that corporations should be taxed at a higher level when they sell property. And so one might argue that corporations have an advantage by not having to pay a higher property tax rate. Now, this is a study. I'm very intrigued by this whole area, this question of business. How good is it to be in business in California or not? And it's very complicated. This is just one aspect of many things. It has to do with environmental regulation, it has to do with climate change, it has to do with permitting, it has to do with sales. There are all these different components to it. And so why don't we vote on this pretty quickly? Wow, that was very interesting. So we have no change, but the next largest group wanted to increase and reduce the deficit by 900 million. Okay, very good. Next. Tax expenditures. Should California restrict or eliminate tax expenditures to help balance the budget? No change. Number 2. Replace, this gets into some interesting miscellaneous stuff you don't hear too much about. Replace the mortgage interest deduction with a tax credit equal to 5% of mortgage interest, saving $1 billion. So is that a sacred cow for Californians and for Americans that you can, you're able to take that deduction? 3, reduce the dependent credit to $99 per dependent from the current level of $309, saving $1.1 billion. That was done? Okay, so when did they did this one in the spring? February? Okay, so this one was done. Number 4, reduce the R&D credit for businesses, increasing revenues by $300 million. And number 4, do all of the above, increasing revenues by $2.4 billion. So if you go for 5, you can reduce this by $2.4 billion. Or you can do nothing with number 1, no change. So why don't we vote? Okay, 38%, $2.4 billion from the deficit. Let's go back to that one. Let's read that one again and see what we just did.
Ballsy vote. You can't really vote for 4.
Was that 5 or 4?
I'm saying there were a lot of votes.
It says do all of it.
Right.
We should read
You
that.
can
We vote
accept,
without
you can
4.
accept what's done. That's the status quo, right?
Okay, so we go on to the next one. Property tax? No, this doesn't totally renounce Prop 13. Would you like to change the current property tax system? No change. Number 2, allow more frequent reassessment of non-residential property. Okay, so this is the corporate one I was talking about. Allow more frequent reassessment of non-residential commercial values, increasing revenues for the state budget by $1.6 billion and for local governments by $2.7 billion. 3, allow assessed values of all property, that's your property if you own any, allow assessed values of all property in California to increase at a rate of 4% per year instead of the current 2%, increasing revenues by $1.2 billion. Seems like it should be more than that, but it's not. 4, change the policy, cutting the tax rate by 50% and reassessing the value of all properties annually. This way, property taxes will be much lower at the start, benefiting new homeowners, but much higher as the property increases in value. But there's no number associated with that. Any questions on this one? In the back?
Given that property tax is a local tax, how do you get 1.6 billion on number 2 out of the state budget?
Because the
I don't
school-
understand how this affects the state budget.
Because under Prop 98, the Prop 98 sets a target for state funding of schools. They first apply property taxes, and then the state piles in on top of it. So if the share of property taxes going to the school goes up, the state has less money has to put up for schools.
If you're more frequently reassessing at a time of property values going down, doesn't it actually reduce the state?
It can if commercial property is declining in value. I don't know that commercial property has gone down in value as obviously.
Mark?
But I also read somewhere that the fact that we have Prop 13 in place where you only get reassessed when property changes hands, it's actually shielded us from big reductions in the property tax. Otherwise, if it had been based on a set reassessments, we'd be getting a lot less out of property taxes here.
That's interesting.
The Wall Street Journal had an article on it. The benefits of Prop 13.
Okay, so why don't we vote, please? We're getting near the end here. What time is it? It's about 10 past 1. So what time do we need to get everybody out of here? About 1:30? Yeah. Okay. All right, we're actually doing good, I think. Wow, we got over the 67%. 1.6 billion from deficit. Oh yes. Let's go back to 2 and look at it again. So this is the one we just voted for, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So this is everybody but us. Okay. Very good. Property tax. Now we're on to the gas tax. Now remember, in the gas tax, Senator Steinberg, there was a gas tax in there for 16 cents. Remember at one point when the legislature was working on this, and I don't know if this is true, but I read that Mr. Maldonado, as part of his deal, he wanted that out. Okay, so, all right, so how should California tax gasoline? No change. Number 2, raise the gas tax from 18 cents to 30 cents and use the additional $2 billion in proceeds for transportation, such as roads, bridges, and mass transit. Number 3, raise the gas tax from 18 cents to 30 cents and use the additional $2 billion in proceeds to support alternative energy efforts. And number 4, raise the gas tax 18 to 30 and use the additional $2 billion to pay debt service on transportation bonds, freeing up general fund resources. Right. Okay, so we're going to vote on this one, please. Are you going to add this up? Yeah. All right. Number 4, $2 billion from the deficit, 63%. Very good. Let's go back and look at this one again. Raise the gas tax, blah, 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 and use additional $2 billion to pay deficit. Okay, so we are down to $8.6 billion. Very impressive. Very impressive. Okay, now, this is my favorite one, carbon tax. Not that I'm saying that I'm supporting it or not into it or anything, but I'm intrigued by it, shall I say. So, should California institute a carbon tax? And as many of you know, the Waxman-Markey energy bill is being discussed, and America has decided, our legislature has decided, instead of going with a carbon tax, they decided to go with a cap and trade program. There's 2 different options. That's the same thing that California has decided to do as part of AB 32. And California's working on its own cap and trade that may be superseded by the federal cap and trade if they do a cap and trade. But certain economists argue that the carbon tax would be better. Many economists argue that a carbon tax would be better than a cap and trade. But for us here, we're just going to answer this question: should California institute a carbon tax? No carbon tax. Number 2, institute a carbon tax, increasing revenues by $6.2 billion, which would bring this down to $2.4 billion. If you go for 2, you're down to $2.4 billion over here. Okay. Number 3, institute a carbon tax using only half the revenues, using half the revenues on income tax rebates for low-income taxpayers, increasing revenues by $3.1 billion. Number 4, institute a carbon tax and use the $6.2 billion revenues to support alternative energy efforts. So if you do this one, it's not going to affect that, but maybe you're excited about supporting alternative energy. Number 5, institute a carbon tax using half the revenues on income tax rebates for low-income taxpayers, and the remaining $3.1 billion to support alternative energy efforts. So that will not affect the deficit. Number 5. Does anybody have any questions about this? please.
Why don't you tell us just what the increase in tax would be and what the tax would actually be imposed on? Right now, this is written like a freebie. No one thinks they're going to buy some carbon and they're going to have a tax. So why don't we find out just what is being taxed and how high it is being taxed to get to $6.2 billion?
Right, and I'm not going to be able to answer that, but there is a way of figuring that out. And the gentleman, Tim Gage helps us with this, and Tim was the head of, during the Davis administration, he was the director of finance. And so he figured all this out, and so the answer is I don't know. But I could find out for you and get back to you.
Well, I know there's an answer to this too, because I know that 6.2 billion didn't come out of the air. But to intelligently vote on this, we've got to have some sense as to just what is being taxed and how much it is going up. Otherwise, it does seem like a freebie. 6.2 billion.
Yeah, if I was guessing, and this is total conjecture, I would say the oil and gas producers. I know cement. You know the ones that we know to be carbon on the.
Also mean utilities. I mean, is our utility bill going to go up? And it's going to go up by 10%?
Right.
Actually, in California, transportation is the largest source of carbon emissions. And the next, I believe, is utility. Although we're less carbon intensive because we use natural gas than say it would be in the Midwest. Our industrial carbon emissions are relatively lower than they are in most other parts of the country. So it would largely come at the fuel pump in power.
Thank you. I think
and
that
water
that's.
bills.
And Rope, you had something to say?
Yeah, I was going to say aviation fuel, gas, petroleum, natural gas, all that.
Yeah, but he's right. 38% of the emissions in California come through transportation. So I think we have to assume that the emissions are carbon, and so therefore some similar amount would be from that. So this is the last one, and so please vote. Okay, drum roll, please. Wow, this is an ambitious group. 6.2 billion from the deficit. Wow, this is very impressive. Why don't you give yourself applause? All right, we have like about 10 minutes. We'll get you out of here in 10 minutes. But in the interim, I wanted to ask, as we revise this,